I was sitting on my dock at the Lake Norman Marina in North Carolina, coffee in hand, watching the morning sun dance across the water when I noticed something that made my blood pressure spike instantly. There, in my designated boat slip number 47, sat a pristine white 30-foot Sea Ray that definitely did not belong to me. My own boat, a well-maintained 28-foot bayliner named the Second Wind, was currently hauled out for hull maintenance at the marina's service yard. I had paid for that slip for 3 years running, never missed a payment, and had explicit documentation that it was mine through the end of the season. The slip rental agreement was ironclad, part of the package deal when I bought my lakefront condo in the Harborview Landing community just up the hill from the marina. I stood up, setting my coffee down on the weathered dock planks, and walked closer to get a better look at the interloper. The boat was expensive, probably worth north of $150,000, with gleaming chrome and teak accents that screamed money. On the stern, in elegant gold lettering, I read the name, Queen's Rule. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. That was when I saw her. Brenda Whitmore, the president of the Harborview Landing Homeowners Association, was walking down the main dock toward the marina office, her bleached blonde hair catching the morning light. She wore white capri pants, a nautical striped shirt that was probably more expensive than my entire week's grocery budget, and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. At 48 years old, Brenda had made being in everyone's business her full-time occupation since her husband's dental practice had apparently made them wealthy enough that she did not need to work. I knew immediately whose boat was in my slip. "Brenda," I called out, my voice carrying across the water. She stopped and turned, pulling her sunglasses down to peer at me over the rims. "Good morning, Benjamin," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Lovely day, is it not?" "Why is your boat in my slip?" I asked directly, walking along the dock to close the distance between us. Brenda waved her hand dismissively, as if I had just asked her about the weather. "Oh, that. Well, Benjamin, I noticed your slip was empty, and I needed somewhere to keep the Queen's Rule for a few weeks while they do some work on the community dock. I figured since you were not using it, it would not be a problem." I felt my jaw clench. "You figured wrong. That slip is paid for. It's mine. You cannot just take it without asking." "I am asking now," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And as HOA president, I think it is important that we all support each other as a community. Sharing resources when they are not being used is just common courtesy." "Common courtesy would have been calling me before you moved your boat into my property," I shot back, "and sharing would imply I had a choice in the matter." Brenda's expression hardened. "Benjamin, I really do not think you want to make an issue out of this. The HOA has been very accommodating to you. Remember when you wanted to repaint your front door that shade of blue? We approved that, even though it was not on the pre-approved color list. I remembered that battle well. It had taken 3 months, 4 board meetings, and a formal appeal process to get permission to paint my own front door a color that was barely distinguishable from the approved navy. And now she was holding it over my head like she had done me some massive favor. "That has nothing to do with this," I said, keeping my voice level. "This is not HOA property. This is a private marina slip that I rent independently." "But you live in Harborview Landing, which means you represent our community," Brenda countered. "And the HOA board has discussed the fact that when residents are not actively using their marina resources, they should be available for other community members who need them. We are actually drafting a proposal about it for the next meeting." "You cannot draft a proposal about property that is not under HOA jurisdiction," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Move your boat, Brenda, today." Her eyes narrowed behind those oversized sunglasses. "I will move it when the work on the community dock is finished. 2 weeks, maybe 3. You will survive, Benjamin. Your boat is not even in the water." 2 weeks? I repeated, incredulous. "Brenda, my boat is being put back in the water this Friday. That's 3 days from now. I need my slip." "Then I guess you will need to find temporary arrangements," she said, turning on her heel. "I am sure the marina has guest slips available. Consider it a small inconvenience for the good of the community." She walked away before I could respond, her deck shoes making soft, squeaking sounds on the dock. I stood there, fists clenched, watching her disappear into the marina office. This was classic Brenda Whitmore behavior. She had spent the last 2 years making life difficult for anyone in the community who dared to question her authority. She had fined people for having the wrong style mailbox, sent cease and desist letters about garden gnomes, and once tried to have a resident's car towed because it was parked on the street in front of their own house for more than 48 hours. But this was different. This was not just petty HOA overreach. This was theft of services as far as I was concerned. She was using something I was paying for without permission and without compensation. I pulled out my phone and dialed the marina office. Linda, the assistant manager, answered on the second ring. Lake Norman Marina, this is Linda. Linda, it's Benjamin Kramer from Slip 47. I have a problem. Let me guess, Linda said with a sigh. Brenda Whitmore's boat. So you know about it? She came in yesterday afternoon with some story about needing emergency moorage and said she had cleared it with you. I thought it was strange, but she was very insistent and said it was just for a day or two until she could sort out her regular slip. I am sorry, Benjamin. I should have called to verify. It's not your fault, I said, rubbing my temple where a headache was starting to form. But I need her moved. My boat comes back Friday. I will talk to Richard, Linda said, referring to Richard Torres, the harbor master. He's out checking the breakwater right now, but he should be back within the hour. This is not right, and we will get it sorted. I thanked her and hung up, then turned back to look at the Queen's Rule sitting smugly in my slip. The morning had started so peacefully, and now I was dealing with Brenda's entitlement yet again. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of phone calls and frustration. Richard Torres called me back around 11 and confirmed that he had not authorized Brenda to use my slip. He said he would issue her a notice to move the boat within 24 hours or face penalties, including potential towing. Marina regulations were clear that slips could not be used without the express permission of the renter, and unauthorized use could result in the boat being relocated at the owner's expense. She is not going to like that, I told Richard over the phone. I do not much care what she likes, Richard replied. His voice had the gravelly quality of someone who had spent decades around boats and water. I have been running this marina for 15 years, and I will not have slip pirates. That is what we call them, people who just help themselves to slips that are not theirs. It is a big problem, and if I let her get away with it, everyone will think they can do it. When are you going to post the notice? I asked. I'm walking down to her boat right now, Richard said. I could hear the sound of footsteps on wood through the phone. I will tag it and send her a certified email as well. She has until noon tomorrow to move it, or I'm calling Lakeside Towing. I felt some of the tension ease from my shoulders. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate you handling this. That is my job. And Benjamin, if she gives you any trouble over this, you let me know. The marina has rules for a reason. That evening, I got a taste of exactly what kind of trouble Brenda could manufacture. I arrived home from work around 6:30, my pickup truck loaded with groceries, to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. The notice, printed on official Harborview Landing HOA letterhead, informed me that I was in violation of Section 7.3 of the Community Covenants regarding hostile and uncooperative behavior toward fellow residents. I read the notice 3 times, each time feeling my anger build. According to the document, Brenda had filed a formal complaint, stating that I had been verbally aggressive and threatening toward her at the marina that morning. The complaint claimed I had used profanity, which was a complete lie, and had created a hostile environment. As a result, I was being assessed a $200 fine and was required to attend a conflict resolution meeting with the HOA board. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She had stolen my boat slip, and now she was trying to paint me as the bad guy for calling her out on it. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the notice, then went inside my condo. The place was small but comfortable, a 2-bedroom unit with a decent view of the lake through the trees. I had bought it 4 years ago after my divorce, needing a fresh start and a place where I could be close to the water. Boating had always been my therapy, and Lake Norman was one of the best places in North Carolina for it. I dropped the groceries on the kitchen counter and immediately started drafting an email to the HOA board. I kept it professional and factual, explaining exactly what had happened that morning, including the timeline and the fact that Richard Torres was already handling the situation through proper marina channels. I attached photos showing the Queen's rule in my slip and included a copy of my slip rental agreement. I concluded by disputing the fine and requesting that the complaint be dismissed as retaliatory. As I hit send, my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 2 units down. "Dude, did you get one of those stupid notices too?" Marcus asked without preamble. "The hostile behavior one?" "Yeah, just found it on my door." "I got one last month because I told Brenda her dog needed to be on a leash when it was pooping in my yard. $200 fine for creating an unwelcome environment. I paid it because I did not want to deal with her making my life hell, but man, she is out of control." "This is insane," I said, pulling a beer from the fridge and popping the cap. "She stole my boat slip, Marcus. Just moved her boat in without asking, and now she is fining me for complaining about it." "That is Brenda for you. She thinks being HOA president means she is the queen of the neighborhood. Half the people here are scared to say anything to her because they know she will retaliate." We talked for a few more minutes, with Marcus giving me the names of 2 other residents who had recently clashed with Brenda over various petty issues. He suggested I reach out to them and maybe organize some kind of group response to the HOA's overreach. "There is power in numbers," Marcus said. "If enough people stand up to her, she cannot fine us all." After we hung up, I spent the evening researching North Carolina HOA laws and residents' rights. I learned that while HOAs had broad authority over community matters, they could not exceed the scope of their governing documents. More importantly, they could not enforce rules about property or agreements that existed outside the HOA's jurisdiction. My marina slip fell squarely into that category. I also discovered that HOA board members could be held personally liable for actions taken outside their authority, especially if those actions were retaliatory or discriminatory. That was an interesting piece of information that I filed away for later use. Wednesday morning arrived with dark clouds and the promise of rain. I took my coffee out to the dock again, half expecting to see the Queen's rule gone, but she was still there, tied up in my slip like she owned the place. The 24-hour notice Richard had posted was clearly visible on the windshield, a bright yellow tag that flapped in the morning breeze. I was just finishing my coffee when I saw Brenda marching down the dock, her phone pressed to her ear. Even from a distance, I could tell she was angry. Her free hand gestured wildly as she talked, and her voice carried across the water, though I could not make out the words. She stopped at the Queen's rule, ripped the yellow notice off the windshield, and stared at it with what could only be described as rage. Then she looked around, spotted me on my dock, and stormed over. "Did you do this?" she demanded, waving the notice in my face as she reached my property. "I did not tag your boat, Brenda. The harbor master did because you are illegally occupying my slip." "This is harassment," she spat. "I have rights as a boat owner and as a member of this community. You cannot just have my boat towed." "I am not having your boat towed. The marina is if you do not move it by noon, which is in about 3 hours. "I am calling my lawyer," Brenda said, her face flushed. "This is illegal. They cannot make me move my boat without proper notice." "They gave you proper notice," I replied calmly, though inside I was seething. 24 hours is the standard, and you cannot use someone else's slip without permission. That is the illegal part. Brenda's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're making a very big mistake, Benjamin. I have friends in this community, on the city council, at the marina. You do not want me as an enemy." "I do not want you in my boat slip," I said evenly. "Move your boat, and we are done here." She opened her mouth to say something else, but then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting from anger to something almost like panic, then turned and walked away without another word, answering the call as she went. I watched her retreat, feeling both satisfied and uneasy. Brenda was not the type to back down easily, and her threat about having friends in high places was probably not entirely empty. But I was not about to let her bully me into submission. Around 10:30, Linda called from the marina office. "Benjamin, you're not going to believe this. Brenda just came in here with some guy she claims is her lawyer, demanding we cancel the notice. Richard told them the notice stands and that if the boat is not moved by noon, we are calling the tow company." "What did the lawyer say?" I asked. "Not much, actually. I think he was just some friend of hers trying to look intimidating in a suit. Richard asked for his bar number and credentials, and the guy suddenly had to leave for another appointment." I could not help but laugh at that. So she is bluffing. Oh, she's definitely bluffing. But she's also not moving the boat. Richard is getting ready to make the call to Lakeside Towing. They said they can have someone here by 1 o'clock. This is going to get ugly, I said. Probably, Linda agreed. But Richard is not backing down. He said if he lets this slide, every slip pirate on the lake will think they can do whatever they want here. Noon came and went with no sign of the Queen's Rule moving. I had taken a personal day from my job at the engineering firm where I worked, knowing that I wanted to be present for whatever happened next. At 12:45, a large towboat from Lakeside Towing Services motored into the marina, its diesel engine rumbling. The boat was purpose-built for moving other vessels, with heavy-duty winches and a reinforced bow. Richard Torres stood on the main dock, directing the towboat operator to slip 47. I walked down to watch, keeping a respectful distance, but wanting to see this through. "You must be Benjamin," the towboat operator said as he prepared his equipment. He was a burly guy in his 50s with sun-weathered skin and a gray beard. "I am Cal." Richard filled me in on the situation. "Thanks for coming out," I said. "No problem. We do this more often than you would think. People get entitled about boat slips." He glanced at the Queen's Rule. "Nice boat. Shame the owner is a jerk." Cal was just attaching the tow lines when Brenda came running down the dock, her phone in one hand and her purse swinging wildly from her shoulder. "Stop! You cannot do this!" she shouted. Richard stepped forward, putting himself between Brenda and Cal. "Ms. Whitmore, your boat is being relocated to a guest slip for unauthorized use of a rented slip. You will be billed for the towing fee and the guest slip rate until you make other arrangements." "I have rights!" Brenda shrieked. "You cannot just move my boat." "I can, and I am," Richard said firmly. "You were given proper notice. You ignored it. These are the consequences." "I'm calling the police." Brenda fumbled with her phone. "Feel free," Richard said. "They will tell you the same thing I am telling you. This is a civil matter, and the marina has every right to enforce its slip rental agreements." I stood back watching as Cal methodically secured the tow lines. He worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Brenda continued to rant and threaten, but Richard remained calm and professional, which only seemed to make her angrier. Cal fired up the winch, and the Queen's Rule began to slowly back out of my slip. Brenda looked like she might actually have a stroke. Her face was scarlet, and she was breathing hard. "You will regret this, Benjamin," she shouted at me. "All of you will regret this." The towboat pulled the Queen's Rule out into the main channel, then began towing it toward the guest slips on the far side of the marina. Brenda stood on the dock, shaking with rage, as her boat disappeared around the breakwater. "That went well," Richard said dryly, coming to stand beside me. "Think she will cause more trouble?" I asked. "Oh, I know she will. But that's not your problem. The marina has your back on this." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Your slip is clear. Your boat can go in on Friday as planned." I thanked him again and headed back to my condo, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. Brenda had made it clear she considered this a declaration of war, and I had no illusions that she was done making my life difficult. I was right to be concerned. Thursday morning, I woke to find that someone had filed a complaint with the county about my pickup truck, claiming it was in violation of commercial vehicle restrictions for residential areas. The complaint was bogus, since my truck was a standard half-ton pickup, not a commercial vehicle. But it still meant I had to deal with a county inspector who showed up at 10 in the morning. The inspector, a tired-looking man named Dave, took one look at my truck and sighed. "Let me guess. HOA dispute?" he asked. "How did you know?" "Because this is the third bogus commercial vehicle complaint I have gotten from this neighborhood this month, all from the same person filing them." He made a note on his tablet. "Your truck is fine. It is clearly personal use. But I still have to file a report because a complaint was made." "Let me guess who filed it," I said. Dave glanced at his tablet. "Brenda Whitmore, HOA president. Yeah, she is becoming a regular time waster for the county. We are actually looking into whether we can charge her for filing false reports if she keeps this up." After Dave left, I checked my mail and found another notice from the HOA, this time claiming that my lawn had not been mowed within the required 7-day window, and that my exterior light fixtures were not on the approved list. Both claims were fabrications. I had mowed my lawn 5 days ago, and my light fixtures had been there since I moved in without any complaints. I photographed everything, including date-stamped pictures of my lawn and the light fixtures, and sent another email to the HOA board disputing the fines. I also CC'd every board member I could find an email address for, making it clear that this was a pattern of harassment and retaliation. Friday arrived, and with it, the scheduled return of my boat to the water. I met the service crew at 8 in the morning as they loaded the second wind onto the travel lift. She looked good with her fresh bottom paint and a few minor repairs completed. The engine service alone had cost me $1,500, but it was worth it to keep her running smoothly. "Looking good, Mr. Kramer," the service manager said. "We replaced those through hulls like you asked, and the engine is purring like a kitten. You are all set for the season." By 10 o'clock, the second wind was back in the water, floating peacefully in slip 47 where she belonged. I stood on the dock, feeling a sense of satisfaction and rightness. This was my space, my boat, and no amount of Brenda's tantrum was going to change that. I spent the rest of Friday morning provisioning the boat and doing the usual checks after a haul out. Everything looked perfect. I was running the engine to make sure all the systems were working when Marcus came down to the dock with a cooler. "Celebration beer?" he offered. "You read my mind," I said, cutting the engine and accepting a cold bottle from the cooler. We sat on the dock, feet dangling over the water, drinking beer and talking about the week's events. Marcus filled me in on the neighborhood gossip, which apparently was entirely focused on the boat slip incident. "People are talking," Marcus said, "and not in a good way for Brenda. A lot of residents think she went too far this time. Stealing your boat slip and then trying to fine you for complaining about it, that is pretty blatant even for her." "Has anyone said anything to her directly?" I asked. "A few people. Janet Morrison told her at the mailboxes yesterday that she was out of line. Brenda told Janet to mind her own business or she would find herself with a nice stack of violation notices." I shook my head. "She is like a mob boss, but for lawn care and paint colors." "Pretty much," Marcus agreed. "But here's the thing. The annual HOA meeting is in 2 weeks, the one where we vote for board positions. I've been talking to some people, and there is interest in nominating someone to run against her for president." "Who?" I asked, intrigued. "You, actually." I nearly choked on my beer. "Me? No way. I do not have time to be HOA president." "You do not have to actually do the job if you win," Marcus said. "The point is to send a message that people are tired of her behavior, and honestly, even if you just force an election, it might humble her enough to back off." I thought about it. The idea of running for HOA president was about as appealing as a root canal. But Marcus had a point. Brenda had gone unchallenged for 2 terms, and that unchecked authority had clearly gone to her head. "Let me think about it," I said finally. That weekend was quiet, almost suspiciously so. I spent Saturday taking the second wind out for a proper shakedown cruise, running her up and down the lake to make sure everything was working correctly after the maintenance. The weather was perfect, with clear skies and a light breeze that kept the temperature comfortable. Being out on the water, away from the HOA drama, reminded me why I loved living here despite Brenda's nonsense. Sunday morning brought a surprise. I was making breakfast when I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 people I did not recognize, a man and a woman, both probably in their 60s. "Benjamin Kramer?" the woman asked. "That is me." "I am Patricia Summers, and this is my husband, George. We live over in the Pinecrest section of Harborview Landing. We heard about what happened with Brenda and your boat slip, and we wanted to talk to you." I invited them in, curious about what they wanted. We sat in my living room, and Patricia pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Mr. Kramer, my husband and I have been fighting with Brenda and the HOA for over a year now. She fined us $3,000 for building a pergola in our backyard without architectural approval. Even though the covenants explicitly state that backyard structures under 10 by 10 feet do not require approval, our pergola is 9 by 9. We hired a lawyer," George added. "Cost us $5,000, but we won. The judge ruled that the HOA had exceeded its authority and ordered them to refund our fines plus our legal fees." "I did not hear about that," I said. "That is because Brenda made sure it stayed quiet," Patricia said. "She had everyone on the board sign non-disclosure agreements about the settlement. But here's the thing. We kept all the documentation, and we have been collecting stories from other residents who have been bullied by her. She opened the folder and spread out papers on my coffee table. I saw complaint forms, photos, email exchanges, and legal documents. It was a comprehensive record of Brenda's overreach and retaliation against residents who had dared to question her. "We are building a case to have her removed from the board," Patricia explained. "North Carolina HOA law allows for board members to be removed for cause if they are acting against the interests of the community or abusing their position. We think we have enough here, but we need more people willing to go on record." "We heard you were thinking about running against her," George said. "That would be good. But honestly, we think removal is the better option. Get her off the board entirely." I looked at the pile of documentation, feeling a mix of anger and determination. "What do you need from me?" "Your story, documented. Dates, times, copies of her notices, photos, and anything you have. And we need you to sign a petition we are circulating to call for a special meeting to address board member conduct." I spent the next hour going through everything that had happened with Brenda, from the boat slip incident to the retaliatory fines and Falls County complaints. Patricia took notes, and George made copies of all my documentation using my printer. "This is exactly the kind of pattern we are seeing," Patricia said. "She identifies someone who challenges her, then uses her position to punish them. It is abuse of authority, plain and simple." "How many signatures do you have on the petition?" I asked. 43 so far," George said. "We need 51 to force a special meeting. That is 20% of the total units in Harborview Landing." "I will sign it," I said, "and I know a few other people who probably will too." By the time Patricia and George left, I felt like I was part of something bigger than just my personal dispute with Brenda. This was about holding a petty tyrant accountable and making sure the HOA actually served the community instead of the ego of its president. Monday brought more retaliation. I came home from work to find a certified letter from the HOA's lawyer, a firm called Daniels & Associates in Charlotte. The letter demanded payment of all outstanding fines within 10 days or face legal action, including possible foreclosure proceedings against my property. The total they were claiming I owed was $1,200, which included the original hostile behavior fine, the bogus lawn and light fixture fines, and several new fines I was not even aware of, including one for having a non-approved doormat and another for improper garbage can placement. I immediately called Patricia, who gave me the number for her lawyer, a woman named Sarah Blackwell, who specialized in HOA disputes. I met with Sarah the next morning at her office in Davidson. She was sharp and no-nonsense, probably in her mid-40s, with short dark hair and glasses that gave her an intellectual air. "Let me see everything you have," she said after we exchanged pleasantries. I spread out all my documentation on her conference table, the same stuff I had shown Patricia and George, plus the new letter from the HOA's lawyer. Sarah spent 20 minutes reviewing it all, making notes and occasionally asking questions. "This is clear-cut retaliation," she said finally, "and this threat of foreclosure is absurd. These fines are not valid, and even if they were, they have not followed proper procedure for collections. I'm going to send a letter to Daniels & Associates and to your HOA board shutting this down." "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked, knowing lawyer fees could add up fast. "For a cease and desist letter and some basic representation, probably around $2,000 to start. But here's the thing. If this goes to court and you win, which I think you will, you can recover your legal fees from the HOA. North Carolina law is pretty friendly to homeowners in cases of HOA overreach." "Do it," I said. "I am done letting her push me around." Sarah drafted a letter that afternoon and sent it via email and certified mail to both the HOA board and their lawyers. The letter was beautifully direct, laying out exactly how each fine was invalid, noting the pattern of retaliation, and warning that continued harassment would result in a lawsuit for abuse of authority and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The response was swift. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Tom Henderson, the HOA vice president, asking if we could meet to discuss the situation. "I think there has been some miscommunication," Tom said, his voice nervous. "The board wants to resolve this amicably." "The board, or Brenda?" I asked. "Look, just meet with us. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock at the community center. We can talk this through without lawyers involved." I called Sarah, who advised me to agree to the meeting but to record it if North Carolina was a one-party consent state for recordings, which it was. She also said she could attend if I wanted representation present. I think I should go alone, I told her. If this is them trying to back down without losing face, having a lawyer there might make it more adversarial. Your call, Sarah said. But record everything, and if they say anything that sounds like threats or intimidation, walk out and call me. Thursday evening, I walked into the Harborview Landing Community Center with my phone recording in my pocket. The community center was a modest building with a meeting room, a small kitchen, and a fitness area that mostly went unused. The meeting room had a long table where 5 board members sat, Brenda at the head, Tom Henderson to her right, and 3 others I recognized but did not know well. Benjamin, thank you for coming, Tom said, gesturing to an empty chair across from them. We want to clear the air about some of these issues. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. Brenda looked like she had been sucking on lemons, her lips pressed into a thin line. We have reviewed your dispute regarding the fines, Tom continued, and we believe there may have been some errors in how they were assessed. Errors, I repeated flatly. Yes, the board has decided to waive the fines in the interest of community harmony. All of them? I asked. All of them, Tom confirmed. We just ask that you withdraw your lawyer's letter and agree to drop any potential legal action. I looked at each board member in turn. They all looked uncomfortable except for Brenda, who looked furious. What about the pattern of harassment? I asked. The false county complaints, the retaliation for exercising my rights at the marina? We do not know what you are talking about, Tom said quickly. Too quickly. I think you do, I said. And I think you are trying to make this go away before it becomes a bigger problem for the HOA and for Brenda specifically. This is ridiculous, Brenda finally spoke up. We are offering you a perfectly reasonable resolution, and you are acting like we are criminals. You stole my boat slip and then tried to punish me for complaining about it, I said, keeping my voice level. That is not reasonable HOA behavior. That is abuse of authority. I did not steal anything, Brenda snapped. I used an empty resource temporarily. You are blowing this completely out of proportion because you have some kind of vendetta against me. A vendetta? You moved your boat into my paid slip without permission. That is theft of services. It was 2 days, Brenda's voice rose. 2 days, and you got me towed like I was some kind of criminal. You refused to move it when the harbor master gave you notice, I countered. You had 24 hours. You chose to ignore it. Tom held up his hands. Okay, everyone calm down. Benjamin, the board is offering to wipe the slate clean. That includes the fines. We just want to move forward. I want an apology, I said. A written apology from Brenda, acknowledging that she used my boat slip without permission and that the subsequent fines were inappropriate. Brenda's face went purple. Absolutely not. I will not apologize for trying to foster community cooperation. Then we do not have a deal, I said, standing up. My lawyer's letter stands, and I will be supporting the petition to call a special meeting regarding board member conduct. I walked out of the community center, my heart pounding. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, Brenda's shrieking something about ungrateful residents and Tom trying to calm her down. The next few days were tense, but quiet. I heard through Marcus that the board was in chaos, with several members apparently arguing that Brenda needed to step down or at least issue an apology. Brenda, predictably, was refusing and threatening to sue any board member who did not support her. The petition for a special meeting reached 51 signatures on Saturday. Patricia called me with the news. We did it, she said, sounding exhausted but triumphant. We have to submit it to the board on Monday, and they have to schedule the meeting within 30 days. What happens at the meeting? I asked. We present our case for why Brenda should be removed from the board. The residents vote. If a majority votes for removal, she is out. She is not going to go quietly, I said. No, she is not, which is why we need to be prepared. I'm putting together a presentation with all the documentation we have collected. It is going to be thorough. That Sunday, I decided to take the second wind out for what should have been a relaxing day on the lake. The weather was perfect again, mid-70s with clear skies. I invited Marcus along, and we packed a cooler with sandwiches and beer. We were about 3 miles up the lake, anchored in a quiet cove, when Marcus brought up the special meeting. Are you going to speak at it? He asked. I do not know, I admitted. Part of me wants to just let Patricia and George handle it. They have been fighting this longer than I have. But you are the most recent example, Marcus pointed out. And honestly, the boat slip thing is pretty egregious. It is easy for people to understand. A pergola dispute is complicated. Stealing someone's boat slip and then retaliating when they complain, that is clear-cut. I will think about it, I said. We spent the rest of the afternoon swimming and enjoying the peace of the lake. It was a good reminder of why dealing with Brenda's nonsense was worth it. This place, this lifestyle, it was what I had worked hard to afford, and I was not going to let a power-hungry HOA president ruin it. Monday came, and Patricia formally submitted the petition to the HOA board. According to the bylaws, the board had to acknowledge receipt within 3 business days and schedule the meeting within 30 days. Patricia told me she had submitted it via email with read receipts and also hand-delivered a physical copy to Tom Henderson's house to ensure there was no way they could claim they had not received it. Tuesday afternoon, I got an email from the HOA board acknowledging the petition and announcing that a special meeting would be held on June 19th at 7 in the evening at the community center. That gave us about 3 weeks to prepare. Sarah, my lawyer, advised me to document everything leading up to the meeting and to be prepared for Brenda to potentially escalate her behavior. Cornered animals lash out, Sarah said. She is facing the end of her reign and she knows it. Be careful. Sarah's warning proved prescient. That Thursday, I came home to find my mailbox had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "liar" across it in red paint. I immediately called the police and filed a report. The officer who came out, a young guy named Officer Mitchell, took photos in a statement. "Any idea who might have done this?" Officer Mitchell asked. "I have suspicions, but no proof," I said, explaining the HOA situation in broad terms. "HOA disputes," Officer Mitchell said with a knowing nod. "We get calls about those more than you would think. Unfortunately, unless you have video evidence or witnesses, there's not much we can do except file the report." I did not have video, which was frustrating. I made a mental note to install a security camera. The next morning, Marcus called me. "Dude, did you hear?" "Hear what?" "Brenda is telling people you are the one who vandalized your own mailbox for sympathy votes before the special meeting. She is on the community Facebook page right now posting about it." I hung up and immediately checked the Harborview Landing residents' Facebook group. Sure enough, Brenda had posted a long, rambling statement about how some residents were staging incidents to make her look bad, and that she had heard from reliable sources that I had vandalized my own property to gain support for her removal. The post was getting mixed reactions. Some people were supporting Brenda, calling the special meeting a witch hunt. Others were pushing back, pointing out that Brenda had no evidence for her claims and that they were potentially defamatory. I screenshot the post and sent it to Sarah. She called me within 10 minutes. "This is actually good for us," Sarah said. "She is making accusations without evidence. If she keeps this up, we can add defamation to the list of issues." "I do not want to sue her," I said. "I just want her to leave me alone." "I understand, but having the option is good leverage. And Benjamin, I think you should consider getting a restraining order if this continues to escalate." "You think it will?" "I think she is panicking, and people do stupid things when they panic." The weekend passed without further incident, but the tension in the community was palpable. I could feel it when I went to the marina, when I checked my mail, when I saw neighbors. Everyone was talking about the special meeting and taking sides. It felt like the neighborhood had split into pro-Brenda and anti-Brenda factions. Monday brought a new development. Tom Henderson, the vice president, resigned from the HOA board via email to all residents. His resignation letter was professional but pointed, stating that he could no longer serve on a board where his concerns about proper procedure and fair treatment of residents were being ignored. Tom's resignation triggered an emergency board meeting, which residents were allowed to attend. I went, along with Marcus, Patricia, George, and about 30 other residents. The community center meeting room was packed. Brenda called the meeting to order, looking harried. She announced that Tom's resignation left the board without a vice president and that they would need to hold nominations and a vote for a replacement. "I nominate Janet Morrison for vice president," Patricia said immediately, standing up. Janet was one of the residents who had publicly called out Brenda for the boat slip incident. Brenda's face went pale. "Janet has not expressed interest in serving on the board. I will serve if nominated," Janet said from the back of the room. I second the nomination, George added. The next hour was chaotic. Brenda tried to table the nomination until the next regular meeting, but the remaining board members, looking increasingly uncomfortable, voted to proceed with an immediate election. Janet won the vice president position in a landslide vote among the residents present. Brenda looked like she might cry or possibly explode. After the vote, she adjourned the meeting abruptly and left without speaking to anyone. That was satisfying, Marcus whispered to me as we filed out. It is not over yet, I reminded him. The special meeting is still 2 weeks away. Those 2 weeks were among the strangest of my life. The community was in an uproar. The Facebook group became a battleground of arguments, accusations, and counter-accusations. Brenda posted multiple times per day, alternating between defending her record and attacking her critics. Several residents, including me, stopped checking the group entirely because it was too toxic. I focused on preparing my statement for the special meeting. Sarah helped me craft something that was factual, clear, and unemotional. I practiced delivering it several times, wanting to sound confident but not angry. The day before the special meeting, I took the second wind out alone, needing some time to clear my head. I anchored in one of my favorite spots, a quiet area near the northern end of the lake with a view of the mountains in the distance. Sitting there, listening to the water lap against the hull, I felt a sense of calm. No matter what happened at the meeting, I had stood up for myself. I had not let Brenda's bullying go unchallenged. June 19th arrived hot and humid, with afternoon thunderstorms predicted. By 6:30 in the evening, the community center parking lot was full, and people were parking along the street. The meeting room had been set up with rows of chairs facing a table where the board would sit. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls. Brenda sat at the head of the table, flanked by the remaining board members. She looked defiant, her chin raised, her expression hard. Janet Morrison, the new vice president, sat to her right looking nervous but determined. Patricia had organized the opposition. She and George sat in the front row with a laptop connected to a projector that would display their documentation. I sat a few rows back, my statement folded in my pocket. At 7 o'clock sharp, Brenda called the meeting to order. Her voice was tight, controlled. She went through the formalities, acknowledging the petition and the purpose of the meeting. Then, she launched into a defense of her tenure as president. I have served this community for 4 years, Brenda said, her voice rising. 4 years of thankless work, of dealing with complaints and problems, of trying to maintain property values and standards. And this is how I am repaid, with a witch hunt, with false accusations and conspiracies? She went on for nearly 15 minutes, listing her accomplishments, most of which seemed to involve enforcing rules and collecting fines. She painted herself as a victim, a dedicated volunteer being attacked by ungrateful residents. When she finished, Patricia stood up. The room went silent. "Thank you for your service, Brenda," Patricia said calmly. "Now let us talk about what that service has actually looked like for many residents." Patricia's presentation was devastating. She showed emails where Brenda had threatened residents, photos of frivolous violation notices. Financial records showing the HOA had paid out over $15,000 in legal settlements and fees due to Brenda's overreach, money that came from all our HOA dues. She showed the pattern of retaliation, documenting case after case where residents who questioned Brenda's authority found themselves targeted with fines and complaints. The room was transfixed. Several board members looked shocked, as if they were seeing some of this information for the first time. Then it was my turn. I stood up, my statement in hand, and walked to the front of the room. "My name is Benjamin Kramer," I began, my voice steady. 2 months ago, I discovered that Brenda Whitmore had moved her boat into my rented marina slip without my permission. When I confronted her about it, she told me I should be grateful to share community resources. When the marina enforced their rules and had her boat towed, she retaliated against me with hundreds of dollars in bogus fines, false complaints to the county, and a campaign of harassment. I went through the timeline, showing photos on my phone that Patricia displayed on the projector. The boat in my slip, the violation notices, the vandalized mailbox, the Facebook posts. This is not community leadership, I concluded. This is abuse of authority, and it needs to end. The room erupted in applause. Not everyone. Brenda still had her supporters, but easily 2/3 of the room was clapping. Brenda stood up, her face red. This is all lies and exaggerations. Benjamin refused to cooperate with reasonable community sharing. He has been hostile and aggressive from day one. I have recordings and documentation of everything, I said quietly, including the meeting where the board tried to get me to drop my complaint in exchange for waiving the fines. That caused a stir. Several board members exchanged glances. Janet Morrison leaned over and whispered something to Brenda, who shook her head violently. "Let us move to a vote," George called out from the front row. "The petition calls for a vote on Brenda Whitmore's removal from the board for cause. All in favor of removal, raise your hands." Hands shot up all over the room. I raised mine. Marcus raised his, Patricia and George. Janet Morrison hesitated, then raised hers as well. I did a quick count. It was easily more than half the room. All opposed? Maybe 20 hands went up, including Brenda's. "The motion passes," Janet announced, her voice shaking slightly. "Brenda, you are removed from the board effective immediately." For a moment, I thought Brenda might actually attack someone. She stood there, trembling with rage, her hands clenched into fists. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. The room erupted in conversation. People were standing, talking, some cheering, others looking stunned. Janet called for order, and after a few minutes, people settled down. "We need to elect a new president," Janet said. "I nominate Patricia Summers." Patricia won the vote unanimously. Just like that, the reign of Brenda Whitmore was over. After the meeting, people clustered in the parking lot talking and processing what had just happened. Marcus clapped me on the back. "Dude, that was intense. Did you see her face when they voted her out?" "I am just glad it is over," I said, though I was not entirely sure it was. Sarah called me the next morning. "I heard about the vote. Congratulations. But Benjamin, be careful. People like Brenda do not handle rejection well. If she does anything at all that feels like harassment or threats, you call the police immediately. You think she will try something? I think she is humiliated and angry, which is a bad combination." For a few days, nothing happened. Brenda's house, which was at the far end of the community, stayed dark. Her car did not appear at the marina. It was as if she had vanished. Then, the following Tuesday, I got a call from Richard Torres at the marina. "Benjamin, I need you to come down here right away," he said, his voice tense. "What is wrong?" "Just come. Now." I drove to the marina, my mind racing through possibilities. When I got there, Richard was standing on the dock near my slip, along with 2 police officers. My stomach dropped. "What happened?" I asked, walking quickly toward them. Richard pointed to my boat. At first I did not see anything wrong. Then I noticed the starboard side. Someone had taken a knife or a key and carved deep gouges into the gel coat, spelling out "thief" in jagged letters nearly 2 feet tall. "Oh my God," I breathed. "We have it on camera," Richard said, pulling out his phone. "The marina installed new security cameras last month after some break-ins. Look." He showed me the footage. The timestamp was from 2 o'clock that morning. In the grainy night vision video, I could clearly see a figure approaching my boat. The person was wearing dark clothes and a hoodie, but when they turned toward the camera for a moment, the face was unmistakable. "Brenda." "That is her," I said. "That is absolutely her." One of the officers, a woman named Officer Ramirez, made a note. "And you can positively identify the person in this video as Brenda Whitmore?" "Yes, I have known her for 4 years. That is her." Officer Ramirez exchanged a glance with her partner. "This is vandalism, criminal mischief. Given the clear video evidence and the value of the damage, this is probably going to be a felony charge." Richard provided the officers with a copy of the security footage. They took extensive photos of the damage to my boat, which I estimated would cost at least $3,000 to repair. The gel coat would need to be sanded down and refinished, and depending on how deep the gouges went, there might be structural concerns. "We are going to go pick her up," Officer Ramirez said. "We will need you to come to the station later to give a formal statement." I nodded, still staring at my boat. All of this, all the drama and conflict, had come down to Brenda sneaking out in the middle of the night to vandalize my property like a teenager. By that evening, word had spread through the community. Brenda had been arrested and charged with felony criminal mischief. The mugshot was public record, and someone posted it to the community Facebook group before the moderators could take it down. In the photo, Brenda looked haggard and defiant, her makeup smeared, her hair disheveled. The arrest seemed to break whatever remaining support Brenda had in the community. Even her most loyal defenders went quiet. The Facebook group, which had been a battleground for weeks, suddenly filled with messages of apology and support for me and the other residents Brenda had targeted. Patricia, as the new HOA president, sent out an email to all residents addressing the situation. She acknowledged that the community had been through a difficult period and promised that the new board would focus on fair, transparent governance. She also announced that the board would be reviewing all fines and violations from the past 2 years to identify any that were improperly assessed. I spent the next few days dealing with the aftermath. I filed an insurance claim for the boat damage and gave my statement to the police. Sarah filed a civil lawsuit against Brenda for the cost of repairs, emotional distress, and legal fees. The criminal case moved quickly. With the video evidence, Brenda's lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. In early August, she pleaded guilty to criminal mischief and was sentenced to 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my boat plus court costs. The judge also issued a restraining order prohibiting her from contacting me or coming within 100 yards of my property or boat slip. Brenda and her husband quietly put their house up for sale in September. By October, they were gone. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they had moved to Florida. The new HOA board under Patricia's leadership was like night and day compared to Brenda's regime. Fines dropped to almost nothing. The board focused on actual community improvements like repairing the community dock and organizing social events. The Facebook group became friendly again, full of people sharing restaurant recommendations and organizing book clubs instead of hurling accusations. My boat was repaired by late September. The gel coat worked so good that you could not even tell where the damage had been. I spent a beautiful October afternoon on the lake, the second wind cutting through the water, the fall colors brilliant on the surrounding hills. Marcus came with me on that trip, and we anchored in the same quiet cove where I had gone to clear my head before the special meeting. "So was it worth it?" Marcus asked, cracking open a beer. "All the drama and stress?" I thought about it, looking out over the water. "Yeah," I said finally. "It was worth it, because if I had not stood up to her, she would still be bullying people. Sometimes you have to fight back, even when it is easier to just give in." "Deep," Marcus said with a grin. "Very philosophical." "Shut up and drink your beer," I said, laughing. We sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The lake was calm, the air was crisp, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. The second wind rocked gently beneath us, safely moored in my slip, exactly where she belonged. The community recovered slowly, but surely from what people started calling the Brenda era. The new board implemented policies to prevent any single person from wielding too much unchecked authority. They created a resident complaint process with oversight and appeals. They made board meetings more transparent, posting agendas and minutes online where everyone could see them. In November, the HOA held its annual meeting, the same one where Marcus had originally suggested I run for president. I did not run, but I did attend. The meeting was cordial and productive, focused on budget planning and upcoming projects. At the end, Patricia stood up and gave a brief speech thanking residents for their patience and support during the transition. "We have all learned something from what happened this year," Patricia said. "We learned that an HOA is supposed to serve the community, not rule it. We learned that power without accountability is dangerous, and we learned that when good people stand together, they can make a difference." Everyone applauded, and I felt a swell of pride. We had made a difference, a small one, maybe in the grand scheme of things, but real and meaningful for our community. As I walked back to my condo that night, I passed by the spot where my mailbox had been vandalized. It had long since been replaced and repainted. No traces of that angry red liar remained. It was like it had never happened. That was how I wanted to remember this whole situation, as a chapter that was over, lessons learned, and moving forward to better days. The lake sparkled in the distance, and I could see the lights of boats anchored out in the darkness. Somewhere down there was my slip, my boat, my small piece of peace that I had fought to defend. December came with cold weather and the end of the boating season. I hauled the second wind out for winter maintenance, but this time it was routine and stress-free. Richard Torres and I had become friends through the whole ordeal, and he personally supervised the haul out. "You going to be ready for next season?" Richard asked as the travel lift carried my boat out of the water. "Absolutely," I said, "though I am hoping next season is a lot more boring than this one." "Boring is underrated," Richard agreed with a laugh. "I spent my winter weekends doing boat maintenance and enjoying the quiet. Without Brenda stirring up drama, the community settled into a comfortable rhythm. People waved to each other again. The Facebook group was full of holiday decorating photos and recipe exchanges. On Christmas Eve, Janet Morrison organized a community potluck at the center. Nearly 100 residents showed up, bringing food and drinks and a renewed sense of being actual neighbors instead of warring factions. I brought my mother's recipe for Swedish meatballs, and they were a hit. Patricia found me near the dessert table and pulled me aside. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, "for standing up when it mattered. A lot of people were too scared to say anything until you did." "I just wanted my boat slip back," I said with a shrug, "but I'm glad it led to something bigger." "It did. You should be proud of that." As I drove home that night, full of good food and feeling genuinely festive for the first time in months, I reflected on the whole bizarre experience. It had started with such a simple, outrageous thing, finding someone else's boat in my slip. It had escalated into battles with the HOA, lawyers, police, vandalism, and ultimately the removal and arrest of a petty tyrant who had made too many people's lives miserable for too long. The lessons were clear. Stand up for yourself. Document everything. Do not let bullies, even ones with official titles, intimidate you into silence. And sometimes the right fight is worth fighting, even when it is exhausting and scary. January brought the new year, and with it a fresh start. I renewed my slip rental agreement with the marina for another 3 years. The paperwork was routine, but I could not help but smile when I signed my name on the line for slip 47. That slip had been at the center of everything, and now it was just mine again, simple and undisputed. The first warm weekend in March, I launched the second wind for the new season. The engine started on the first try, and I took her out for a shakedown cruise. The lake was still cold, the water a deep blue gray, but the sun was warm and the sky was clear. I ran her up to full throttle, feeling the hull rise up and the wind rush past, and I felt absolutely free. Marcus came down to the dock that evening as I was washing down the boat. "Welcome back to the water," he said. "Feels good, right?" "Feels perfect," I agreed. "So any regrets? Wish you'd just let Brenda keep the slip for those 2 weeks and avoided all the drama?" I thought about it seriously. No, because it was never really about the slip. It was about the principle. She thought she could just take what she wanted because of her position. Someone had to tell her no, and you did. And now she is someone else's problem in Florida. We both laughed at that. Poor Florida. As spring turned to summer, Harborview Landing continued to thrive under the new board. The community dock was repaired and expanded. The board organized a community yard sale and a 4th of July party. The neighborhood felt like a real community again, not a police state. I spent my weekends on the lake, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, always grateful for the simple pleasure of having my boat in my slip. The second wind became my refuge again, the place where I could escape and recharge. One Saturday in June, almost exactly a year after the special meeting that had removed Brenda from power, I was anchored in my favorite cove when I saw another boat approaching. It was a nice 40-footer, and as it got closer, I recognized the man at the helm. It was Tom Henderson, the former vice president who had resigned rather than continue serving with Brenda. Tom waved and called out, "Permission to come alongside?" "Granted," I shouted back. He maneuvered his boat next to mine, and we tied them together so we could talk. Tom's wife was with him, a pleasant woman named Rachel, who I had met a few times at community events. "Benjamin, good to see you out here," Tom said. "Beautiful day." "Perfect day," I agreed. "How have you been?" "Good. Really good, actually. I'm glad I resigned when I did. I could not believe some of the stuff that came out at that special meeting. I knew Brenda was difficult, but I did not know the extent of what she was doing." "It got pretty bad," I acknowledged. "I heard about what she did to your boat. I'm sorry you went through that." It worked out in the end, I said. The boat is fine, Brenda is gone, and the community is better off. We talked for a while about boats and lake conditions and how the new board was doing. It was pleasant and easy, the kind of conversation that reminded me why I loved living here. Eventually, Tom and Rachel continued on their cruise, and I sat back in my captain's chair, enjoying the solitude. As the sun began to set, I started the engine and headed back toward the marina. The water was like glass, reflecting the orange and purple sky. Other boats were heading in too, and we waved to each other as we passed. At the marina, I navigated carefully to slip 47 and executed a perfect docking, something I had done hundreds of times but never took for granted. I secured the lines and went through my end-of-day routine, wiping down surfaces, checking bilges, making sure everything was secure. It was meditative, this care of the boat. As I finished and stepped onto the dock, I paused and looked back at the second wind, sitting peacefully in her slip. This was mine. This boat, this slip, this life I had built for myself. And I had defended it not just from Brenda, but from the principle that some people could just take what they wanted because they thought they had the authority. Standing up to that principle had been the right thing to do, even though it had been hard and messy and sometimes scary. I walked up the dock toward the parking lot where my truck was waiting. The marina was peaceful in the twilight, boats gently rocking at their moorings, halyards clinking softly against masts. It was a good place, a place worth protecting. That night, I slept better than I had in months, with the windows open and the sound of the lake in the distance. Tomorrow would bring another day, another opportunity to enjoy the life I had fought to defend. And that felt like the best kind of victory, the quiet kind, the lasting kind, the kind that showed up in moments of peace and simple gratitude. The saga of Brenda Whitmore and the stolen boat slip had become a story told in the community, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of standing up for yourself. But for me, it was more than a story. It was a reminder that home is not just a place you live. It is something you sometimes have to fight for. And when you do fight for it, when you stand your ground against people who think they can bully you into submission, you create something more valuable than just winning a dispute. You create self-respect and the knowledge that you will not be pushed around. As summer stretched on, I continued to enjoy my boat and my community. The drama of the previous year faded into memory, replaced by barbecues and boat trips and lazy afternoons on the dock with a good book. Life was good. Life was peaceful. And my boat stayed exactly where it belonged, in slip 47, where no one would ever dare to move it without asking again.